Welcome to Mr. Screenwrite. This is Nick, and this is the video you've been waiting for. The Eighth Wonder of the World, a diorama based on the backside of water from the classic Disneyland ride or the brand new Disney movie Jungle Cruise, whichever floats your boat. Ha! Hey, disclaimer, this video is going to be full of extra puns because, you know, the Jungle Cruise. So I'm starting with this wooden base from my box of scraps. I had already painted the sides black and the platform green for a reason I literally do not remember, but let's say I was just planning ahead for this project. To create the rock structure that makes up Schweitzer Falls, named after the famous explorer, Dr. Albert Falls, I'm carving pink insulation foam into strips that will make up the rock wall and a larger chunk for the waterfall overhang. Looking at this footage now, I'm kind of amazed I didn't cut myself while I was at it. I'd make a joke about all this cutting, but I'm afraid I'd just butcher it. I'm carving an opening for each of the three waterfalls and leaving a rock formation to separate them. Then I dug out where the pool of water will sit before it becomes the waterfall, and I made these in separate chunks to make it a little easier on myself, because, yeah, that sounds good. I did it on purpose, and totally wanted to glue them together later. Here you can see an idea of what I'm going for with that overhanging rock formation, but I'm going to need a lot more rock to give this height because the rock is pretty tall. I chopped the strips of foam into bricks to mimic the way the rock structure is built at Disneyland, and it was lots and lots and lots of bricks. And okay, let's go glue them back together again. So I decided to use hot glue because it sets a little faster and sort of melts the foam a little bit together. But don't you just love hot glue strings? While you watch me put this all together, I just want to say thank you. I'm getting a lot of new subscribers and I am loving all your comments. Please keep them up. If you're new or haven't subscribed, please consider it and let me know in the comments if there's anything that you want to see me build. I'd love to hear your suggestions and see what you guys are excited about. Okay, now back to the video. Now it's time to break out the old Mod Podge and black paint mixture to give the rocks a base coat. I don't know why, because it's the middle of summer right now, guys. Do you really need a coat? These are the jokes, folks. These are the jokes. A lot of people use resin for water, but since this is the backside of water, I thought toilet paper would be more appropriate. By painting the toilet paper in watered-down Mod Podge, it basically becomes paper mache. You're probably thinking it'll look crappy, but just roll with it. I'm going to take a crack at it anyway. I'm sorry. That was a lot of toilet humor. Toilet jokes aren't my favorite, but well, they're a solid number 2. After a few layers of toilet paper, it's got a nice wavy texture to it. You have to let this dry though, like really make sure it's dry before you paint it. So in the meantime, I'm going to start painting the rock structure. I'm trying to make this look like sandstone, I think, but well, most people take it for granite. Of course, I overestimated how much height I would need. I probably made it the equivalent of like 5 stories tall for this model when I really just needed 4, and you know, that's a whole other story. So I chopped a portion out of the rock and glued it back together. Once that was set, I dry brushed the rocks. The first layer I started with was like medium brown, and I just used progressively lighter browns, and then finished with basically an off-white. And I can never stop loving how dry brushing can take a bit of brown foam and make it just look so real. To blend it all together, I made a gray wash and used that over the whole rock structure. After that had dried, these strings of glue that were dried into the rocks were bothering me, so I decided to dry brush a little bit of green onto the rocks to give it sort of like a mossy or like algae look. And then I painted the glue that was dried onto the rocks green, and now I think they look simply divine. Get it? Divine. I let the toilet paper dry for about a day until it was hard and crusty, exactly how I prefer my toilet paper. I mixed green paints to get that authentic look of jungle river dye. Did you know that the waterfall on the Jungle Cruise isn't just the Eighth Wonder of the World? It's also where the attraction's river water is colored green, and when I found that out, I just about died. I used my sophisticated painter palette here, a paper plate, to mix different shades of green and brown, and then painted them in sort of a gradient. I used the lighter shades of green against the rocks and the darker shades where the deeper sections of the river would be. I really want to try this out with a larger section of water. This was pretty small and I couldn't sell the effect too much. So leave a comment if you can think of any dioramas or scenes you'd love to see that have more water in them. But now, something's got to go on that water. It's time to make the boat. I looked up some images to reference which helped get the size and shape a little more accurate. I think ultimately the boat ended up being a little smaller than I wanted, but I think it looks really great. I started with the benches and the steam engine on the interior of the boat. Because this was going to be inside the boat and a little harder to paint, I decided to use some colored clay for the things I didn't want to paint. But I ended up painting it all anyway, as you'll see. I cut some metal tubes for the canopy supports and baked them into position. And then I cut them down to give it a little slope, like in the picture that I found. I made the smokestack by rolling a tube of clay. Very difficult sculpting process involved here. Only try this if you're an expert. It was around this point that I decided to go old school with this boat. I felt like a white boat with the striped roof would just stand out better rather than the sort of brownish boat against a brownish rock. And so I covered the boat with white clay. I rolled thin tubes of white and red clay. And off camera, I lined them up in the pattern and rolled them together with a little clay rolling pin to create this thin canopy. It was a very tedious process, which is why I ended up not filming it. It wasn't perfect, but it's so much better than having to paint all these thin lines. With all the clay baked, it was time to paint the details. I ended up painting brown for the wooden top of the boat and the interiors, and painted a red strip along the bottom, and then each of the support rods got a coat of white paint. And I super glued all these pieces together and put the boat in dry dock for storage. Now for the key component of the backside of water. I used Mod Podge's Dimensional Magic product to create the waterfall effects. I've never seen anyone use this product to make waterfalls in their diorama before. I've seen lots of other techniques that people have used, but I wanted to try this out, and I think it ended up being really effective. I put small lines of it on wax paper. I made probably about 30 or 40 of these and let it dry overnight. In the morning, it was very satisfying to peel it from the wax paper. I cut strips of clear plastic from some leftover packaging to be the support of the waterfalls, and once those were glued into place, I added the Dimensional Magic strips in layers to build up the waterfall. I used tacky glue to put it all into place, and the glue dried pretty clear, not perfect, but I think for churning water in a waterfall, having a little bit of glue not entirely clear just sort of helps sell the dimension of this waterfall. I hope your eyes aren't glazing over by now, because this is exciting. It's time for a glaze. Hi Gloss, I'm Nick. I put down a layer of glaze on the top and the bottom, and I decided it was just going to take too long to give it the depth I wanted through layers and layers of glaze, and so I decided I'd try the Dimensional Magic again. Be careful as you put this down to pop any bubbles that form. Spread it around evenly. I used just a little coffee stir stick. Took a while for this to fully dry, especially on the top, but once it did, I really loved the effect. It really felt like water. To finish it off, I used gloss Mod Podge to create the surface of the water. After painting a little bit of a layer down, I blew through a straw to create ripples. I learned this tip from the Boulder Creek Railroad YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the description below. There are tons of tutorials on that channel if you ever want to get into building miniatures like this. I'd never actually done it before this video, and it was super satisfying to see the effect it produces. You can see in the light here just the ripples and sort of the waves. All I needed was a dry brushing of white paint to sell the effect of rougher water around the waterfall. And now I think we're ready for a glamour photo shoot of our Jungle Cruise diorama. Let's just hope the elephants have their trunks on. Hey, thank you for sticking around to the end. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and like this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Check out my social media links for more. And until next time, this is Nick at Mr. Screenwrite.